Welcome to The Explainer. Let's dive right in because today we're untangling one of the most haunting, complex, and just utterly frustrating cold cases of the last 40 years. We are traveling back to April 1981, straight into the heart of the North Dakota oil boom and a town called Williston. It is your classic setup for a mystery, a small, tight-knit community suddenly flooded with thousands of transient workers, cash, and frankly, chaos. And right in the middle of all this, a local teenager vanishes into thin air, leaving behind a trail of bizarre clues, dead suspects, and some deeply unsettling family secrets. Today, we're looking at the disappearance of Barbara Louise Cotton. 15. That's how old Barbara was when she disappeared. She was just a high schooler, saving up money from her diner job, hoping to get her own apartment. By all accounts, she was quiet, maybe a bit timid until you got to know her, but fiercely loyal to her friends. She also had some very distinct physical traits. She had a severe S-curve in her spine, which gave her a noticeable limp, and she really relied on her eyeglasses. So, she wasn't exactly someone equipped to just disappear off the grid without a trace. And yet, on the night of April 11th, 1981, that is exactly what happened. At first, the local police kinda just treated Barbara's disappearance as a standard runaway case, which sadly delayed an official missing persons report for days. So the crucial point is, you do not run away to start a new life and leave all of this behind. She left her hard-earned, uncashed paycheck. She left all the money she had in bank savings, her clothes, her cigarettes, and perhaps most importantly, those eyeglasses. Remember, she had physical challenges. Leaving her glasses behind completely shatters the theory that she simply packed up and ran away on her own. She was either taken or she met with foul play before she could ever make it home. Which brings us to the core mystery of our explainer today. I mean, how does a 15-year-old girl vanish on a short 5-block walk in her own hometown, setting off an investigation that spans 4 decades, implicates 3 primary suspects who, spoiler alert, are all now dead, and unearths some incredibly dark contradictions within her own family? To figure that out, we really need to map out her final known footsteps. Part 1, The Night She Vanished, tracing the timeline of April 1981. Okay. Let's reconstruct the timeline of that fateful weekend. Because honestly, the deeper we look at the hours right after Barbara's disappearance, the stranger the whole story becomes, especially regarding the actions of the people closest to her. So here's what we know. On the evening of April 11, Barbara supposedly has dinner downtown with her mother, Louise, and a man. Afterward, Barbara actually declines a walk home, heading toward Recreation Park, which is just 5 blocks from her house. She is never seen again. Now, just past midnight on April 12, Louise is already frantically calling Barbara's friends, totally panicked. By 4 p.m., she files the missing persons report. But then, on April 13, just 2 days later, Louise calls the police and gives them this highly specific information. She claims Barbara is with a man named Stacey Werder in room 205 at the Pioneer Hotel in Scobie, Montana. I mean, think about that for a second. How did her mother have the exact room number of a motel in another state just 48 hours after her daughter went missing on a 5-block walk? Part 2, investigating the suspects. Transients in the oil boom. That bizarre tip from Barbara's mother leads us directly into the next phase of the investigation, the suspects. And to really understand the suspect pool, you have to remember Williston was just exploding with transient workers at the time. And this brilliantly illustrates the kind of chaos investigators were dealing with. Let's compare our first 2 primary suspects. Over on one side, we have Stacey Werder, the guy Louise claimed Barbara was with in Montana. Stacey was a transient drifter, recently discharged from the Navy with severe paranoid schizophrenia and a documented history of extreme violence toward his own family. The weird thing, Barbara's friends had never even heard of him. Only her mother placed him in town as this alleged boyfriend. Then, on the other side, we have Frank De La Pena. He was a transient seismology worker right there in Williston who suffered a severe mental breakdown just weeks after Barbara vanished. Days after that breakdown, De La Pena drove to Wyoming, where he abducted and murdered 2 young girls. So you have 2 deeply disturbed, violent transient men, both in the exact same small town the very week Barbara vanished. Let's zoom in on Stacey Werder for a minute. By July 1981, just a few months later, Stacey gets arrested for disorderly conduct in Malta, Montana. While he's sitting there in a jail cell, he makes a final phone call to his sister in California. When his sister warned him that her new dog might actually bite him if he came to visit, Stacey replied with this incredibly chilling quote. "The way I'm coming home, it won't matter. Tell Mom I'm sorry for what I did." Later that night, Stacey took his own life right there in his jail cell. Was that a confession to Barbara's fate? His sisters certainly believed he was capable of it and thought the guilt might have driven him to suicide. But ultimately, he took that secret to the grave. Actually, taking secrets to the grave is pretty much the frustrating theme of this entire investigation. Stacey Werder hung himself in July 1981. Frank Della Pena, our other transient suspect, was arrested for that double homicide in Wyoming and hung himself in his jail cell in May 1981. They both died within months of Barbara going missing. But then, investigators start looking at a third suspect, Frank Cotton, Barbara's own older brother. And just like the other two, he's deceased, having died of cancer in 1999. All three primary suspects are dead. But Frank Cotton's presence on this list forces us to pivot our attention completely away from the transient oil workers and look straight inside Barbara's own home. Part 3. The Family Mysteries. Contradictions close to home. This is where the explainer takes a really dark turn. Because while it is super easy to just blame the faceless drifters of the oil boom, the actions of Barbara's own family in the years following her disappearance present some of the most baffling contradictions of the entire case. For nearly 2 decades, Barbara's mother, Louise, was absolutely relentless, plastering missing posters everywhere, chasing leads, calling friends in the middle of the night. She was the singular driving force keeping this case alive. But then, in 1998, everything abruptly changed. She just stopped. The search was completely abandoned. Why? What could possibly make a fiercely dedicated mother just suddenly give up hope after 17 years? Let's look at how this builds step by step. First, Barbara's much older brother, Frank, is accused of abusing some of his nieces. And instead of siding with the victims, Louise fiercely defends Frank, which completely alienates a massive portion of their family. To her, Frank was the golden child. Fast forward to 1998. Frank is diagnosed with terminal colon cancer and actually moves in with Louise so she can care for him. It is exactly at this moment that Louise entirely halts her search for Barbara. Almost immediately, she files legal paperwork to declare her missing daughter officially dead. And when Frank passes away in 1999, Louise purchases a double headstone, putting Barbara's name right next to Frank's. Family members and investigators have openly wondered for years. Did Frank make a deathbed confession to his mom? Did Louise always know, and once Frank died, she just didn't need to pretend to search anymore? It's a genuinely terrifying possibility. Part 4, 40 years later, rabbit holes and missing pieces. Looking back at this case, more than 40 years later, the sheer volume of conflicting evidence is just staggering. I mean, every time you think you have a solid theory, whether it's the violent drifter Stacey Werder, the serial killer Frank Della Pena, or the deeply troubled brother Frank Cotton, a new piece of information surfaces that pulls you in a totally different direction. Take what investigators call the puppy coincidence. The night before she vanished, Barbara called her best friend Diane and casually mentioned she was going with a friend the next day to take a puppy to the vet. She even invited Diane along, but Diane said no. Weeks later, suspect Frank Della Pena abducted his 2 victims in Wyoming by asking them to help him find a lost puppy. Is this just an incredibly eerie coincidence, or is it the actual thread connecting Barbara to a known killer? Facts like this literally keep detectives awake at night. Lisa Joe, a genealogist who married into the Cotton family and now advocates for Barbara, sums it up perfectly right here. There is no shortage of rabbit holes in this case and no way to know if the correct one has even been found yet. It is so true. You've got false sightings at hospitals, mysterious dinner guests, a mother who seemed to know way too much, way too soon, and 3 dead suspects who can never be interrogated. It is just a maze of dead ends. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. All 3 of our main suspects are gone. Barbara's mother, Louise, passed away in 2004, taking whatever secrets she held right to her grave. So, who really knows what happened to Barbara Cotton on that April night in 1981? Is someone still out there, walking the streets today, holding the missing puzzle piece to this 40-year-old mystery? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.